Good evening, everyone. Welcome. It is a pleasure to look out at an audience and the rafters filled with people and energy and just really positive vibes. So I'm really pleased about that. I think it has been, maybe I'm a little biased, but I think this has been a remarkable 24 hours. I think we were really, to have Durey up here yesterday, and Vanita Gupta up here yesterday, and Rabbi Rostin, and Jabril, who's still here, I think, Shah Muhammad somewhere in the audience. And today to have Director Comey with us was wonderful. But I must say, this is the panel, this is the session I have most been looking forward to. Because I get to be up here with some old friends, some new friends, but really three of the most important voices, I would say, in the civil rights community at a moment now when we're facing so many challenges. So each of these individuals, and I'm about to introduce them, is responsible for their own organization. But more importantly, each of these individuals brings a unique voice and perspective that speaks for a much broader community. And as I talked about yesterday, the importance of having an ethos of inclusivity in this moment, it makes me proud to say clearly and unambiguously to everyone in this room and anyone who is listening that the Jewish community stands with the Latino community, the African American community, the Sikh community, as well as with the Muslim community, the LGBTQ community, the disabled community, and all those in this moment. And I am blessed to be able to say that. So now, without any further ado, I'm going to just quickly introduce our panelists. To my immediate right is Janet Murguia. Janet is the head of La Raza, which I will let Janet explain the organization in her own words in a moment, but she's literally one of the most important Latinas in the United States and a voice for the fastest growing demographic community in the country. Welcome, Janet. Marc Morial, who heads up the National Urban League. For those of you who don't know, the National Urban League is one of the oldest and most important civil rights organizations in these United States. It's worked on affairs and interests of the African American community literally for generations. You know, I had the blessing of working for the former head of the Urban League, Ron Brown, at a prior life much earlier in my career. But Marc Morial is a freedom fighter and a champion for justice, and let's welcome Marc.
Thanks.
And Sapri Kaur, who heads up the Sikh Coalition. For those of you who don't know, American Sikhs from all walks, represent all walks of life. They're a community that's had a number of different challenges in recent years, and we are just lucky to have Sapri here on the stage with us. Welcome, Sapri. So I'm going to ask each of these individuals to tell us just a little bit about their organization, their community, to get us started. And I'll do that by laying out a framing question. Maybe, Sapri, we can start with you. So talk to us a little bit about, for your community, the Sikh community, what you see today as some of the biggest barriers to America living up to its ethos and its aspirations of pluralism and the challenges that the American Sikh community is facing.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to be here. It's wonderful to be here with all of you, and congratulations on what sounds like a great start to your time together. You know, the Sikh American community has been here in the US for about 130 years. We are, as many of you may know, the fifth largest world faith with about 25 million adherents. There are roughly, we think, a floor of about 500,000 Sikhs here in the US. So we're a very visible minority in all walks of life. Hate backlash and hate crimes are not new to the Sikh American community, unfortunately, but the organization I lead, the Sikh Coalition, was actually born in the wake of the 9/11 tragedy. To take you back to that day, of all the images and feelings that we had, I think if you think back to what you saw on TV, the B-roll for hours and days and weeks and months equated the turban and the beard with terror. And we are the only faith where a turban is mandated for men and optional for women, as well as unshorn hair for everyone. And so what happened in that moment, in those hours following the impact of the planes was a further othering of our community, and our organization was born. And if you speak to the co-founders at that time, they'll tell you that 15 years later, they would have expected us to have worked ourselves out of a job and to actually be focused on very different work and different needs of the community. But I unfortunately can share with you that that's not at all the case. If anything, we have seen rise in hateful rhetoric, a rise in violence against our community, a rise in school bullying and profiling at times by our own government. And so that's the environment we find ourselves in. And, you know, we talk a lot about the current climate. Bigotry and hate and people acting out those sentiments, as we all know, did not begin in this country a few months ago. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's going to abate anytime soon, but these are not isolated incidences, the targeting of Sikhs, the murder of Sikhs, since 9/11 and before. And so our organization works to combat that hate, to respond in a crisis, to fight employment discrimination, to work on school bullying and racial profiling.
Wonderful, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So Marc, as I said, you run this venerated organization. I'd love you to talk a little bit about not only the National Urban League, but the annual report, The State of Black America, that you just released last week, and it's called for a Marshall Plan for Main Street.
First of all, Jonathan, I want to just say thank you very much to you for your leadership, your friendship, and your partnership, and say good evening, and shout out any of my friends from New Orleans and Louisiana who are here. And certainly...
They're a quiet bunch, Marc.
Yeah, it's not Mardi Gras. But also to thank them because ADL recognized me with its Torch of Liberty Award several years ago, and I want to really acknowledge their very important work. So the National Urban League, an historic civil rights organization, has been around since 1910. Today, we operate through a network of 88 affiliates throughout the nation. We provide direct services to some 2 million people. Those are after-school programs, job training and workforce programs, home buyer education and asset building programs, and programs that help small entrepreneurs. In addition to that, we are a voice in Washington, D.C. and state capitals and at city halls around these issues, particularly in the arena of economic empowerment. For 41 years, we've been publishing the State of Black America report, which is available to all of you online. And what we do is we measure the comparative status of blacks, whites, and Latinos in the United States according to an index. And the index measures in accordance with about 300 data sets. In 2017, the status of African Americans versus whites is at about 72%. For Latinos, it's approximately 78%. So we do this diagnosis each and every year, and I can tell you there were 2 areas which stuck out this year as areas of some progress. One was we've made some progress when it comes to education. High school graduation rates are trending up in the United States. Dropout rates for children are also trending in the right direction. We are not where we need to be as a nation, but I think the needle is moving in the right direction. The challenge for now is, will this continue? Secondly, in the area of health care, where we've measured disparities for 41 years. Over the last 3 years, we've seen a narrowing of those disparities. I give a great deal of credit to the Affordable Care Act and the effort, because that public policy intervention cut the uninsured rate by African Americans indeed in half. Today, the reason why I'm honored to be here, and it's special to be here, is it's an opportunity with all of you to reaffirm something that the National Urban League has always been about, and that is this important vision of a multicultural, pluralistic democracy. And America is on a journey, and we have an important responsibility, right, to teach our children and also to impact public conversation about what America indeed should be and what America can be. and that is a nation which is fair and just for all, regardless of race, religion, ethnicity, orientation, or political disposition. And that's the journey we're on. So we do that work. We're proud to do that work. I'd recommend this report to each of you. And then finally, we don't like to just be diagnostic. We like to be prescriptive. So we've published this year what we call our Main Street Marshall Plan, which is a call for a comprehensive investment of public and private dollars in rebuilding the main streets of America. What are the main streets? They're in big cities. They're in small towns. They're in villages and they're hamlets. They're where you and I live. So this is about building our physical infrastructure, roads, bridges, parks, playgrounds, schools, community centers, but also our human infrastructure. We need to strengthen the ability of our children to succeed in school, the ability of our children to be able to afford college, so that we can build the kind of America that we all want to live in. So I recommend both of these to you. They're both available online.
So let's make sure that in the ADL app, and this is directed to staff, in the ADL app we can provide links to the reports, the National Urban League reports, so everybody can get their hands on them really easy with just a few clicks. I'm looking at Romy for that. You're real good with the thing, Romy. Help us figure that out. Yeah, okay, good. Got it. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
So I want to turn now to Janet. As I look out at this audience and most of the people involved in ADL, I think their fathers and mothers or grandparents, or maybe a generation beyond, they either came to this country as economic migrants, or they came to this country as political refugees. Yeah. There are people in the hall whose relatives came to this country in the hulls of slave ships. Immigration is something that has been core to this organization since the 1950s, when JFK spoke in this very room at our 50th.
Wow.
And he wrote the Nation of Immigrants as a young senator on behalf of ADL. Talk to us about the state of immigration today. Help us understand where it is and where you see it going, because I think this is an area of opportunity and common cause.
No question. Good evening, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here and honored, and really want to commend Jonathan for representing really what is the mission of ADL in order to build a more inclusive and welcoming society and democracy. Our organizations have had a history of working together, and I'm so proud of that. I know my predecessor, Raul Izaguirre, worked closely and shoulder to shoulder with Abe Foxman and others. And I'm so pleased to be able to continue this partnership and deepen it at the most important time. You mentioned folks here about their parents and grandparents. Let me just briefly mention that my parents came to this country from Mexico, seeking that better opportunity for their children, the American dream. And even though my dad had a 7th grade education, my mom a 5th grade education, they worked hard. They believed in the promise of this country, and they instilled in me and my brothers and sisters important values like hard work and sacrifice, and hard work and sacrifice, and oh, sorry, you get the picture. This is, but you know, a strong sense of family and community and faith, all of that was embedded in the vision that they had for their children in this country. And it didn't come easy, but I'm proud that my parents were able to see my brother Ramon graduate from Harvard Law School, the first in our community and our family to do so. I'm proud that my parents were able to see my brother Carlos graduate from law school and be sworn in as a United States Federal District Court judge, the first Hispanic in Kansas, of all places, to be doing that. I'm very proud that my twin sister Mary was able to graduate from law school, be sworn in as the first Latina on the federal bench in Arizona, and now sits on the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals. And I'm proud that they were able to see me graduate from law school and work in the West Wing of the White House for President Bill Clinton. I know the power of that American dream. And at the helm of NCLR, the National Council La Raza, it is my privilege to try to make sure that we open the doors to the American dream for everyone, including the Latino community. That is why we work with the network of nearly 300 community-based organizations across the country that serve 7 to 10 million Hispanic families and others every day in the areas of health, education, workforce, community development and homeownership, and of course, civil rights and immigration. And while people often see our organization and sometimes define Latinos as only immigrants, I'm here to tell you I sit here as a proud American who's proud of my history and my culture and my ancestors. Nearly 8 in 10 Hispanics are U.S. citizens in this country. You wouldn't know that by the rhetoric that you are seeing out there today. But the issue of immigration has ended up being a wedge issue when it comes to this country and, more importantly, to immigrants and including the Latino community. It's so important that we work together to solve it, because as long as it is broken and unresolved, people, and oftentimes it can be a political tool often used by both parties to get what they want. We want to make sure that we remove the politics from this and just get a common sense solution to immigration reform. We believe that if there is enough political will to do that, we can do it. It's more important now because we're seeing it mischaracterized now in so many ways and used as a weapon to divide us. So we do believe that we have to have a system that obviously supports the rule of law, but understands that we need to do it in a common sense way. We need to deal with our borders and make sure that there is secure borders. Everyone believes that we as a sovereign nation should have secure borders, but we should bring sanity to how we do that. A wall is not going to secure our borders. It is only going to divide us. We can use technology and other types of strategies to make sure we have secure borders, but a wall is not the symbol that we want representing this country at this point in the 21st century. We want to make sure that we could do that rationally. Of course, we need to deal with modernizing our legal immigration system. We need to make sure that it's responding to what our economic needs are as a country, and doing so and incentivizing those types of oftentimes use of visas and other types of opportunities to include people to help us, and to make sure that we're investing in our communities here to seek to fill the jobs, and it should strike that right balance. But we also need to make sure that we're bringing not just that economic dimension to reforming immigration reform, but a moral dimension to reforming immigration reform. And that means we have to have a way, a humanitarian way of dealing with those 11 million who are undocumented but have been part of this country now for over a generation, and whose children have been embedded and are U.S. citizens now. We can't use a way of dealing with this system that will divide those families. So obviously immigration reform becomes very important. NCLR is at the helm of working toward common sense immigration reform. We appreciate the partnership across all of these different communities and movements, but we need to make sure that ultimately we're not doing this on an ad hoc basis, but that we achieve a permanent legislative solution that can represent our values as a country.
Excellent job, Jen. Excellent. I really appreciate your passion and your energy, because I feel it too. I feel it too. We all should feel it. The language that they are using in certain circles to describe Latino immigrants today is the same language they used to describe Jewish refugees 40 and 50 years ago. And I want to talk more about the refugees issue in a moment. First, I just got to comment. Janet, you worked in the West Wing and you head up the largest Latino, advocacy organization in the country, but you're kind of an underachiever in the family, so.
It's true. That's true.
We may have the wrong Murguia up here. I'll keep that in mind for next year.
Yes, I'll get you a list of names.
So, I want to, one of the things I admire about you, and I want this a question for everyone, is that you are willing to speak truth to power. You spoke truth to power to the prior administration for some of their policies on immigration. And you said it. And, you know, I know you might not have won friends in certain circles with my old boss, but you spoke your truth. Yeah. And in this moment, I think it's a time when we all need to speak our truth. And look, we're only 110 days in or something like that, and not allow this to be normalized.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning it. I really do. Jonathan's referring to a period in the Obama administration President Obama is someone who I greatly admire.
Me too.
I really do. And on so many fronts, we saw so much important progress. But Jonathan is referring to a period within that first part of the President Obama's administration where we kept seeing the rate of deportations and raids in communities grow and grow, so much so that we passed a historic mark of over 2 million individuals deported, none of them that they could correlate, I wouldn't say none of them, the vast majority of them that could not correlate with having criminal records. For us, that was highly painful and really harmful to not just our families, but our communities that we were seeing this. And that 2 million mark was more than all the previous presidents in the 4 previous presidencies combined. So for us, this was highly problematic. And President Obama is a friend, but I felt that we needed to be honest about what the impact of those deportations were having on our families in order to create an opportunity to educate others and find a more common sense solution. After that, President Obama, with his Department of Homeland Security, moved forward through executive order an effort that would prioritize deportations, that would prosecutorial discretion would be used as a lens, and we would go after those who would do us the most harm and those who would be a threat to our national security or any of our communities. And that is the policy that was in place when all of a sudden after the election, now it has been upended again, and we're seeing indiscriminate efforts now, very, very targeted efforts now to go after anyone who's undocumented but has been rooted in these communities. Young people like dreamers who came to this country because their parents came here, have been here for a generation and through no fault of their own, but now are subject to deportation. So bringing common sense policies to this lens of immigration is so important, and being able to call out anyone on the left or the right when your community is threatened and endangered is so important for all of us. And I feel like I have a lot to learn from the Jewish community, the African American community, and others when I've seen them do that. So I really appreciate learning from you all and knowing that we are on this journey together.
You know, Jonathan.
Marc, can you respond to that as well?
So, civil rights and social justice today is a contact sport. You know, it used to be, and I had a long career in politics, that when people were angry at you, they'd send you all these love letters, right? The hate mail, and it would come through the mail, and you get a chance to read it. Nowadays, all they do is resort to Twitter and tear you up. And so when Janet stands up, or Jonathan stands up, or when any of us stands up in today's world, you can be very viciously attacked in social media, and sometimes those sorts of attacks even make some of your own, they make your family members, if they see it, upset. They also sometimes make your own supporters uneasy because they say, you are hurting the reputation of either yourself or your organization given the attacks. But let me say this, at this point in time in American history, nothing is more important than principle and courage. Principle and courage. And we are nonpartisan organizations. What does that mean? To me, that means I begin with my values and my principles. And whoever connects with those values and principles, then they are my friend. If they do not connect with my values or principles, then they are not my friend. I don't care what they have behind their name. I don't care what they look like. I don't care whether they expound. We must reaffirm as civil rights and social justice organizations in the proud tradition of all of our founders, this very important principle, this principle of tolerance, this principle of respect, this principle of justice, and this principle of fairness. And we must, notwithstanding the fact that many of us have had the opportunity to live, perhaps, lives of some economic success, receive education from great schools, live in some comfort, don't have to, in many cases, worry about whether next month's mortgage payment or rent payment is going to be made. We must have the courage to raise our voices, to stand up, to support those efforts in America today to create an inclusive, multicultural America. We're at a crossroads in American life, a time that could be described as a tipping point. And it's a time when one will ask 20 years from now, where were you and where did you stand? Because what we cannot allow is on our watch is the hands of time to be turned back. What we cannot allow is the legitimization of hate as some sort of political philosophy or some sort of acceptable ideology. It is not. It never has. It never will be. And what can unify us as people of goodwill is that fundamental notion of what we want to see in 21st century America. So immigrants, I am in many conversations about immigration. Some say, why would you, as an organization focused on African Americans, focus on immigrant rights? Because did you know that approximately 15% of all undocumented immigrants in the United States are from the African diaspora? They're from the Caribbean, and they're from Africa. And did you know that there's also a percentage of undocumented immigrants who are from places like Ireland? This issue has been twisted and contorted with race and ethnicity in the middle of it. The undocumented community and the immigrant community is made up of people from all continents in the world, all who found their way to the shores of the United States. We have to reaffirm that, and we've got to battle the campaign of disinformation and, yes, fake news and spin, which many use to try to characterize these issues. So this is really all about whether we're going to have the courage to stand up for our principles in the 21st century. And I know ADL is going to be right there.
100%. Now I want to turn to Supreet, and I mean one thought to open with. We're going to talk a little about immigrants and the experience. But I think many people in this room probably do not realize, as Supreet said, you know, the Sikh community in America has been here for 130 years. But many of the members of the community came to the United States after the horror of the partition in India. And I think many might not realize that the Sikh community that lived in the Punjab in that region went through incredible pain and endured real hardship, many of these families, and were displaced and dislodged and have stories that have echoes of our stories in this room. And yet what was interesting is last week, when I testified at the Senate, I sat next to Dr. Prabhat Singh, who is a medical doctor at a hospital at Columbia University up in New York. He's as American as any of us sitting up here. And yet he talked about the hate crimes and the instances, the assaults that he endured after 9/11, and then a final one just a few years ago that put him in the hospital with a broken jaw. And he shared with me that many of these incidences that the Sikh community has endured are not reported at all. Right. So talk to us a little bit about this phenomenon and maybe even how we can be helpful.
Yeah, so 9/11 happened, and as I mentioned before, there was sort of this extra layer of fear, and we felt as a Sikh American community it was a double tragedy. It was a tragedy for us alongside the rest of the country, and then people were looking at us as if we had attacked our own country. And 4 days after 9/11, on September 15th, the first murder and a hate backlash crime was against a Sikh by the name of Balbir Singh Sodhi in Mesa, Arizona. And we've seen hate crime after hate crime, and recently you may have read or heard about the sick in Kent, Washington, in the suburb of Seattle, who was working on his car in his driveway, and an assailant came up to him, told him to go back to his country, pulled out a gun, and shot him. And you know, to build off of the wisdom that we've heard so far about battling bigotry and hate being nonpartisan, I mean, being part of the core of who we are as human beings, I think regardless of your politics, we can all agree that it is not okay to not like the way someone looks and to pull out a gun and shoot them. And yet, this is the state of our country, and it's not new. And so when I talk to community members about what to do, they are very much looking for leadership at the national level. They are very much looking for leaders across all communities to speak in one voice, one loud voice, one persistent voice against hate. They are also looking for actions that they can take. Mm-hmm. And I think the key for us, all of us together, is how do we actually live our values? Mm-hmm. Not just speak truth to power, but live truth to power. What does that look like? It's hard. You know, every year I give a presentation in my son's school. He just turned 7 last week.
Bravo.
And
happy birthday.
Yeah, it was great. It's such a great age. And we talk about his turban and his Sikh articles of faith. And, you know, starting in the preschool, I like to put out a picture of a superhero, a picture of a police officer, a picture of a firefighter. And I ask these kids, what do they all have in common? Oh, they all help people. They all take action towards justice. They're people you can count on. And you ask a group of 3-year-olds, how do you know that? And they say, well, they have a uniform. And I always tell them, yes, Zoraver, my son, has a uniform too. Our faith, not unlike the Jewish faith, has articles of faith that represent the fullest embodiment of our values. And what does it mean to align your thoughts, your words, and your actions on a daily basis? What does it mean to wear your values on your sleeves? And so I think we need to show up for one another in the ways that we've been articulating. We need our leaders to speak truth to power, but we need every single person in their everyday lives to make micro decisions that create a groundswell, because we did not get into this hot mess we're in overnight. It did not happen over the last few months. It did not happen over the last 18 months. And it would not have abated regardless of the presidential election. It would not have. And so we're not going to get out of it in a single speech. We're not going to get out of it in 140 characters. It is going to be hard work. And it is going to be the choices that each one of us makes every day about how we're going to live our values. That means when you see something hateful, even micro, when you hear something, how do you stand up? You want to be safe, because we do live in an era where people take out guns and shoot people for looking different. But you want to be able to be an upstander, not a bystander. Mm-hmm. It's so important. So when I hear somebody saying something that I don't like and it's not directed at me, but I know it's creating this society where we've given people permission to act. We as a society have given people permission to act out their bigotry. So we as a society need to course correct that. Do I speak up? How do I speak up? How do I tell the person who was the object of that rhetoric that I stand with them? How do I teach people around me and create a groundswell of people who are going to say, no, not on our watch. Not on our watch. We're not going to take it. So I think there are policies, of course, and there are so many important organizations like yours and all of yours doing that work, ours as well. It's important. But one person isn't going to get us out of this. One organization is not going to get us out of this. One speech is not going to get us out of this. You have to think about, what are your actions on an everyday basis? Do you know your neighbors? How can you love your neighbors if you don't know your neighbors? Do they know you? Do you care about them? Do they care about you? Do you want to have that loving community? Do we think about standing up for others even when it might hurt our community a little bit at the onset, because it's the right thing to do, because we need to show solidarity together? I think these are the choices we have to make, and there are really hard choices. And I've I've been really heartened to see so many of the right choices being made, so many things that, bless you, really, really inspire me in my day-to-day. But I also, if we're going to speak truth to power, I think we've fallen short collectively in a few pockets. I think we're all trying to very honestly navigate the waters. These are uncharted territory for us in recent memory in some way. And I think we're going to have to challenge ourselves every single day in our own personal actions, but also collectively, what are we willing to compromise on, and when are we going to use our strength even more forcefully to stand united against hate, and what does that look like?
So I appreciate that, and I think that's a good lead-in. I'm going to frame a question for each of the panelists because we only have about 5 minutes. I'm going to ask each of you to think about I'm going to get political because the president signed that EO, and now nonprofits can do the whole politics. I'm going to, we might not like that, but I'm going to ask each of you to give me one thought on what you'd like to see this administration do on behalf of all communities in the next, let's say, 12 to 24 months, one policy thing. But before I do that, speaking of attacks like Marc talked about, and in the interest of manifesting what I think we just heard from Saprit, I just want to acknowledge, we have no one here on the panel tonight wearing a hijab or identifying as a practicing Muslim, but I want to acknowledge in this moment that we stand in solidarity with our Muslim brothers and sisters, even though they're not here today. And there's been a lot of noise in our community about this issue in recent months. And let's just say, we might not agree on all the issues, but who does? Certainly no one in my family. But let's assert without apology our common humanity. Let's recommit right now to do everything we can to reconcile and come together with the American Muslim community and find ways to demonstrate what Saprit just said and work together. In particular, in defense of those refugees who want the same things that my wife as a refugee, that my grandparents as a refugee wanted when they came to this country. We will do that at ADL. All right, you've had a moment to think about it. Tell me, let's work down the panel. What's the one thing, or at least one thing, if not the, you'd like to see this administration do on the issues that affect your community in the next 12, 24 months? Got to keep the answers short.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would like to hear President Trump say one good thing about immigrants or about, or maybe even the Latino community, but since day one of his campaign, and again, I'm not trying to be political, I just would like for him to get it on the record if he could, but I've only heard disparaging comments when it comes to immigrants or to many Hispanics. And for me, I would like to see more language used that would bring us together as a country, as opposed to divide us at every turn or create wedges between us. And I really believe that singularly could help a lot in terms of acknowledging that he is a president for all of us in this country and begin a road to solving the nation's problems. But when you have a president who doesn't seem to acknowledge that even there are positive things to say about the contributions of your community, and really has chosen more to demagogue and demonize and scapegoat a community, it's very, very hurtful. It's very un-American. And I would like to see some positive comments about the contributions of immigrants and of Hispanics in this country.
Hear, hear.
So let me second Janet's motion, because I'd like to see the same thing. Mr. President, pass this plan.
Nice.
This plan in toto. Don't change one word. Don't change one sentence. Commit $2 trillion to rebuilding
Come
the
on,
city.
Your Honor. You know it doesn't work that way.
No? But hey, you asked me what I want?
Right.
That's what I want. Because see, what I like is action,
Yeah.
right? We want some action. So I think fulfilling your commitment to, quote, come up with a great plan to rebuild America's urban communities, here it is. Pass this plan and pass it now.
Bravo. Supreet?
I would, of course, echo both of those. You know, the current mission statement of the DOJ Crime Task Force is to, quote, combat illegal immigration and violent crime. I would like to see that mission statement changed. I would like to see the formation again of the Hate Crime Task Force to look at the data and to work with all of our communities on the preventative side and on the right side of crisis response. I think the framing is wildly off and it builds from both of those recommendations. I think we need to get back on track, and that's a really simple way to start to make good on getting back on track.
Bravo. So all I have to say is, in closing, I don't care how you vote, or to whom you pray, or where you're from, or who you love. But I will say, at least for me, this is the America. This is the America that I cherish, and I'm so proud to.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Folks, enjoy your dinner.